Hello, everyone. I'm Robert Nicholson from the ED Treatment Information Center. Today, my guest is Brian Mahoney. Brian is the creator of the psychologicaled.com website and YouTube channel. He's been helping men deal with psychological ED for 20 years through his hypnotherapy and coaching practice. Prior to that, Brian was a vice president of the Public Relations Research Division at LexisNexis, a unit of the Reed Elsevier Company. So Brian, welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Let's just jump right in. You've been helping men with psychological ED. What does that mean? What is psychological erectile dysfunction?
I'll give a little bit of a slightly long answer to this and back up and talk about the nervous system. Okay, nervous system has two modes: sympathetic, fight or flight; parasympathetic, rest and digest, or feed and breed. When the nervous system is in parasympathetic mode, everything works fine. Guys get erections with no problem. When it's in the sympathetic mode, the fight or flight mode, the body diverts blood away from the penis out to the fight or flight muscles. So the arms and legs, it takes the blood away from that area. That could happen, sure, if there was a real tiger in the room. That's not the case with the guys I see. Most of the time, guys are thinking about the situation, the sexual situation, in a way that's triggering that fight or flight system in a way that diverts blood away from their erection. They lose their erection and they've got a problem. So it's a purely psychological thing. All the hardware is there physically, but it's the thinking that they're doing and the emotions that they're experiencing that are preventing them from getting good erections.
Uh-huh. So there are a lot of different things that can cause erectile dysfunction, both physical and psychological. If someone is experiencing ED, how do they know whether they're dealing with a physical problem or a psychological problem?
The only way to know 100% for sure is to see a doctor. And if there's any doubt whatsoever in a guy's mind, I always suggest that they consult a doctor. When someone calls me, the question that I always have is, how do they do on their own? If the guy can masturbate successfully, consistently with no problem at all, it's probably a psychological thing. Because for most guys, they're fine on their own, and it's when they're with a partner that they have the problem. Once in a while, I'll see a guy who will say, yeah, I'm great with partner A and partner B, but partner C, I can't get an erection at all. Probably going to be psychological. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But for me, the big question is the guy okay if he's solo? If he's okay if he's solo, it's probably going to be a psychological issue. But again, I always suggest if there's any doubt whatsoever that a guy talk with a doctor.
Yeah, I'm really glad you said that, because erectile dysfunction can sometimes be a symptom of a really serious underlying problem. So we always recommend that people check in with their doctor first and find out what's going on. But assuming the doctor doesn't find any serious problems, doctor says you're clear physically, it's probably a psychological problem. How does someone deal with that? What are the treatment options for psychological ED?
A lot of the things that you'd probably first guess at in terms of seeing some type of a traditional psychologist. There are sex therapists, there are relationship therapists. A good amount of research has been done on cognitive behavioral therapy, psychoanalysis. There's some options there. So pretty much anything that would fall under the traditional psychology umbrella, there's a lot of options there. Outside of that, Cialis and Viagra, even though they're working at the physical level, those can be very useful to guys, just to kind of, for some guys, just to kind of get them over that hump, to help them kind of build up that confidence a little bit. That can be useful. The research on those types of drugs with therapy is pretty compelling. The pair of them together work very well. This surprised me, actually. From the Psychological ED website, I actually reviewed the research that's been done on the effectiveness of all these different treatments for psychological ED, and acupuncture actually does pretty well in the research, and I would not have expected that, but it does. Mindfulness, meditation, there's some good research there. Those are really the main ones. You get a little bit more into alternative approaches in the hypnotherapy as well. But outside of those approaches, you start to get a little further outside the mainstream.
Okay, so it sounds like there are a number of options.
Sure.
You yourself have a coaching practice and you also provide hypnotherapy. So can you tell me a little bit about when you decide hypnotherapy is the appropriate treatment and how that works to help the patient?
Sure. And what I'm going to describe is a lot of the reason that I do both hypnotherapy work and other types of approaches with the coaching, because what I find is it's not a one-size-fits-all thing. I can see 5 different guys who each have a psychological ED issue, but they'll sound exactly the same on the surface in terms of their symptoms, the problem, but the underlying structure of the problem, the how each guy is doing it, the why it's happening for each guy will be completely different for each guy. So it'll take a completely different set of approaches to help each one get it solved. So on the hypnotherapy end of the spectrum, for a lot of guys, it's structured kind of like a phobia. Like if you think of someone who's afraid of spiders, has a spider phobia, they're walking down the street, they see that little spider. At that moment, they get it. Logically, rationally, analytically, it's just a little spider. They know it's not going to bother them. But at a deeper level, at that subconscious, unconscious, emotional body level, they're terrified. Their heart pounds, their stomach clenches, their palms sweat. They get this really strong signal of fear. And all that conscious awareness that they have that the fear doesn't make any sense doesn't do anything to make it go away. They still feel really scared. In situations like that, hypnotherapy can be really useful to connect with the part of their mind that's at least somewhat outside of consciousness that's sending that fear signal that consciously makes no sense to them. When they can connect with that part of their mind that's sending that intense fear signal, get at that issue, start doing some work there to help that part of the mind, usually the result is the person can then go back out, walk down the street, see the spider. They're not getting that signal anymore. So they feel pretty much like everyone else does. For a lot of guys, ED can be structured very similarly. They're with a familiar partner. They're safe. They know it's no big deal. Logically, they should feel fine, but they go into the bedroom and their heart pounds and their stomach clenches and their palms sweat and they're really, really scared. A situation like that, hypnotherapy can be enormously useful to getting it resolved. On the other end of the spectrum, and again, there can be a lot of different ways that guys can do issues like this. But on the other end of the spectrum, for some guys, it's almost the opposite. It's more like they're hypnotizing themselves into the problem with the stories they're telling themselves, the beliefs they have, the things that they're imagining that are triggering the fight or flight system, and it's through their thinking. And for those guys, there's a very different set of approaches that I'll usually take with them to help them change their thinking and their relationship with it so that sympathetic fight or flight system isn't being triggered anymore.
It's really interesting. Yeah. So just as there are a lot of causes and treatments for physical problems, the same is true with psychological problems. You need to tailor the approach to the underlying problem.
Yeah, it really is. And what's interesting to me is, again, how similar they can look on the surface, but when you start to get into it a little bit, you really get into a deeper conversation with the guy, and very, very different things can be going on.
So you're obviously very good at what you do. You've given this a lot of thought, deep insight through years of practice. For a lot of people who are dealing with psychological ED, they don't know where to turn. Do you have any general recommendations for how someone can find help if they're dealing with a psychological issue?
Yeah. And I would honestly, the first thing I would suggest would be the website that I built, psychologicaled.com, which is not a sales site. It's not about me. I say it because there's a page on there that again lists all the different treatment options and what the research is to support them. There's also some links to places to go for help. Psychology Today has a database that you can look up, different therapists with different types of expertise. There's different apps. There's different online courses. Part of what's on the Psychological ED site as well is I've reviewed some of the more popular products out there in terms of apps and video courses, stuff like that. So I think that if could be a really nice sort of starting point for a guy to get a sense of what all the different options are, what the research says, and just some good links for where to go from there.
That's a great resource. Thank you. So, Brian, I think you've answered my questions today. Is there anything you'd like to add for guys who are dealing with ED?
Yes, there's hope. And I say that because so often guys wait to get help. And, I've worked with, I remember I had a client one time, I think he had a psychological ED issues for about 20 years. And finally his wife just said, you have to do something about this, because he would just blow it off. He would just, he didn't want to deal with it. And I think there was a lot of kind of hopelessness driving that. When he came in, it was a fairly straightforward issue to solve. So there he is saying, oh, why didn't I do this 20 years ago? So when I say hope, it's that psychological ED issues, as dark and serious and lonely as they can feel for a lot of guys, it's solvable. It's oftentimes actually not even all that big a deal. So I would kind of wave the flag that if someone's watching a video like this and considering, oh, maybe should I get help? Maybe should I do something about this or not? Absolutely. Look out there, find some help. There's lots and lots of good options.
That's a great message, Brian. Thank you very much. For those of you out here in the audience, please check out psychologicaled.com. It's a wonderful site. And as Brian says, there are a lot of great resources. So, Brian, thank you for your time today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks, Bob.
Okay.